For years, the loudest sound in my life was the one no one else could hear. It was a silent, frantic scream trapped behind my teeth, a pressure that built behind my eyes until the world was just a throbbing, blurry ache. I was the good daughter, the quiet niece, the agreeable woman who never made waves. My silence was my currency for peace in the family, but the price was my own voice. I paid it every day with a piece of my soul, until the day I realized I was bankrupt.
That feeling of being silenced, of being invisible in your own life, is a weight so many women carry. Welcome to Unbroken Women. I'm your host, Susan Bentley, and today we're honored to share the powerful story of Amara Khan from Michigan. Hers is a journey of finding her voice, not by shouting, but by finally refusing to be quiet any longer. This is Amara's story in her own words.
My world was fragrant with cardamom and rose water. It was the soft clinking of teacups during family gatherings, the warm weight of my mother's hand on my shoulder, the intricate dance of tradition that we all knew by heart. I loved my family, my community. I loved the sense of belonging, the certainty of it all. My role in this world was simple: to be pleasant, to be helpful, to be quiet. I was an observer by nature. My large, dark eyes took everything in from the sidelines. I listened to the men discuss business and politics, their voices filling the room with authority. I watched the women manage the household with an unspoken, telepathic efficiency, their conversations a gentle murmur about recipes, children, and community news. My own thoughts, my own dreams felt like they were written in invisible ink. I wanted to be a landscape designer. I had sketchbooks filled with gardens and parks, secret worlds I built on paper. But when the topic of my future came up, it was always framed around who I would marry, not what I would build. And so I learned to smile, to nod, to pour the tea, and to keep my sketchbooks hidden. It was easier that way. Peace was the ultimate goal, and my silence was the path to achieving it.
This piece, however, came at a cost. It felt like I was wearing a coat that was 2 sizes too small. On the outside, it looked fine, but inside, I could barely breathe. Every time I swallowed an opinion, every time I bit back a disagreement, the coat got tighter. The weight was this constant low-grade hum of anxiety in my chest. It manifested as chronic headaches, a dull, persistent throb that started at the base of my skull and wrapped around my temples like a vice. Doctors found nothing wrong, but I knew. It was the pressure of unspoken words. It was the feeling of being a ghost in my own life, my body present, but myself, my essence, completely invisible. I was performing the role of Amara, the good, quiet girl, but the real me was shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller with every polite nod and every forced smile. The weight was the terrifying realization that if I vanished one day, the shape of my absence would be defined only by the tasks I no longer did, not by the voice that was no longer heard.
The first crack in my perfect facade wasn't a dramatic shatter. It was a tiny hairline fracture. I was at a cousin's engagement party. The room was buzzing with joy and congratulations. I was helping my aunt serve dessert when I overheard a conversation between 2 uncles. They were discussing a business deal, and one of them said, "Oh, don't worry about her opinion. Women get emotional. We'll decide what's best." He gestured vaguely toward his wife, who was smiling just a few feet away, completely oblivious. And in that moment, something inside me went cold. I looked at my aunt, my mother, my cousins, all these brilliant, strong women, and saw them through a different lens.
We were the pillars holding up this world, yet we were treated like decorative statues within it. Later that night, I lay in bed, the happy music from the party still echoing in my ears, and for the first time, a dangerous thought took root. Is this all I am? A pair of hands to serve and ears to listen, but no mouth to speak? It wasn't a shout. It was a whisper. But once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it.
The whisper grew louder over the next few months, but the event that turned it into a roar was devastatingly simple. My father and my uncle had decided to sell a small property that my grandfather had left to my brother and me. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was a small house with a beautiful wild garden, the one place where I felt I could breathe, the place that inspired all my designs. The plan was to use the money to fund my brother's new business venture. It was a good plan, a logical one. The problem was, no one asked me. I walked into the living room one Sunday afternoon to find my father, my uncle, and my brother gathered around the table, looking over documents. My mother was bringing them coffee. I heard my name mentioned, and I paused. "Amara won't mind," my father said with confident finality. "She doesn't have a head for these things anyway. It's better we handle it." My brother nodded in agreement. They didn't even look at me. I was standing right there, a living, breathing person whose future was being discussed and decided, and they looked straight through me. I felt the air leave my lungs. The room became a distant buzz. All the years of biting my tongue, of swallowing my words, coalesced into a single, crushing moment of absolute powerlessness. I wasn't a partner in my own life. I was a passenger. And in their eyes, I wasn't even important enough to be notified of a change in destination. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and walked back to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs. My first instinct was to rationalize it. They mean well. They're just trying to protect me. It's a smart financial decision. Making a fuss will only cause trouble. The conditioning ran deep. The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach. What would happen if I spoke up? The arguments, the disappointment in my father's eyes, the label of being difficult or disrespectful. I imagined my mother's pained expression, begging me to just let it go for the sake of family harmony. I would become a problem, a disruption to the careful balance of our world. Who was I to challenge their wisdom? They had navigated life far longer than I had. The fear wasn't just of their reaction. It was the fear of being cast out. My entire life, my identity, was woven into the fabric of this family, this community. If I pulled on that one thread, my own voice, I was terrified the whole thing would unravel, leaving me utterly alone, adrift in a world I wasn't prepared for. So I tried to push it down. I tried to swallow this new, bitter pill just as I had swallowed all the others, but this time it wouldn't go down. It was stuck in my throat, choking me. The breaking point came 2 nights later. I was lying in bed, the ceiling a blank canvas in the dark, my headache a raging storm behind my eyes. I could hear the faint sound of the television downstairs, the comfortable, normal sounds of my family's life moving on without me, and the rage, a feeling so foreign and terrifying to me, just erupted. It wasn't a thought. It was a physical, uncontrollable force. I grabbed my pillow, pressed it hard against my face, and I screamed. It was a sound I had never made before. It was raw and guttural and full of everything I had ever suppressed. Every ignored opinion, every dismissed dream, every moment of feeling invisible. It all came out in that one muffled, desperate sound. I screamed until my throat was raw, until my lungs burned, until my body was shaking with violent,
tearless sobs. When it was over, there was only silence. A different kind of silence. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of emptiness. The calm after a devastating storm. And in that hollowed-out quiet, a single, crystal-clear thought emerged. I would rather be alone than be invisible. I cannot live like this anymore. My old life didn't fade away. It shattered in that moment, on my tear-soaked pillow. The next morning, I felt strangely calm. The exhaustion was profound, but the frantic anxiety was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The decision wasn't made in a moment of bravery. It was made in the ashes of my complete collapse. It was a choice born of survival. I decided I was going to speak. Not to scream, not to fight, but to simply speak. To insert my voice into the spaces where it had always been absent. The thought was terrifying. It felt like a betrayal of everything I had been taught, a rejection of the daughter my parents loved. I knew it would hurt them. I knew it would be seen as rebellion. In my world, a woman's assertiveness was often mistaken for aggression. But the alternative? To go back to the silent screaming, to let the headaches and the invisibility consume me, was no longer an option. It was a choice between their comfort and my sanity. And for the first time in my life, I chose me. I was going to break the silence. My chance came a few days later. The family was in the dining room after dinner, discussing plans for the upcoming Eid celebration. My uncle was suggesting a big, expensive banquet hall, and everyone was nodding along. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. My palms were sweating. I took a deep breath, and the words came out quieter than I intended, but clear. "I think that's a bit much," I said. "What if we hosted it in the community garden? It would be more intimate and save a lot of money." The conversation stopped. Dead. Every single eye turned to me. The silence was deafening, 100 times heavier than my old internal silence. For a moment, no one knew how to react. My father stared at me, his expression a mixture of shock and confusion. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck, and the instinct to apologize, to retract, was overwhelming. But I held his gaze. I didn't smile. I just waited. It felt like an eternity before my mother, bless her, tentatively said, "That's an interesting idea, Amara." It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was a crack of light. In that moment, I felt a jolt of something I'd never experienced before. A terrifying, exhilarating surge of power. That first step opened a door, but the path beyond was filled with resistance. My small act of speaking up was seen not as a contribution, but as a challenge. The dynamic had shifted, and no one was comfortable. My father took me aside a few days later. "What has gotten into you?" he asked, his voice laced with concern that felt more like a warning. "You're not yourself. You're making people uncomfortable." My suggestions were subtly ignored. If I offered an opinion, the conversation would be steered away. I started to notice a new kind of silence around me, the chilly silence of exclusion. At gatherings, I'd be left on the periphery. Cousins who I'd grown up with would give me hesitant, uncertain looks. I overheard my aunts whispering in the kitchen, their words sharp little daggers. "She's gotten too Americanized, so disrespectful to her elders." The worst was the quiet shunning. It wasn't overt aggression, it was 1,000 tiny cuts. It was not being asked for help. It was conversations that would stop when I entered a room. It was the palpable disappointment from my mother, who just wanted her peaceful, easy daughter back. They weren't trying to be cruel. They were trying to put me back in the box I had stepped out of, because my new shape frightened them. And a part of me, the part that craved their approval, was screaming that they were right.
The external resistance was hard, but the internal war was relentless. Every night, I'd lie awake, my stomach churning with guilt. Was I destroying my family? Was I trading the warmth of belonging for a cold, lonely pedestal of principles? The silence I had fought so hard to break had been replaced by a deafening inner critic. You're selfish, you're ungrateful, you're hurting the people you love. The urge to just give in, to apologize, to go back to being quiet and agreeable was immense. The familiar pain of invisibility almost seemed preferable to this new, sharp pain of isolation. I missed the easy laughter. I missed the uncomplicated affection. I felt completely, utterly lost, caught between a world where I didn't fit in anymore and a new one that didn't exist yet. My voice felt less like a tool of empowerment and more like a weapon that was only hurting myself.
My lowest point came during my cousin's wedding. Weddings are the heart of our community life, a vibrant tapestry of family and celebration. But for me, it was torture. I was there physically, but I was a ghost. No one asked me to help with the preparations, a role I had always cherished. I was seated at a table on the far edge of the reception hall, away from the main family tables. Throughout the night, I watched my family laugh, dance, and celebrate, and I had never felt so alone in a crowded room. My mother shot me worried, pleading glances, but she was caught, afraid to alienate herself by siding with me. The pain was so acute, it was a physical ache in my chest. This is what I had done. I had chosen my voice over this. As I sat there, invisible again, but this time by design, I felt the last of my resolve crumble. I decided right then and there that it wasn't worth it. I would go to my father the next day, apologize for everything, and beg to be let back in. I would put the voice away forever. The fight was over. I had lost.
As I was getting my coat to leave, feeling utterly defeated, a hand touched my arm. It was my great aunt, Sophia. She was a quiet woman, widowed young, always on the fringes herself. I barely knew her. She didn't say much. She just looked at me, her dark, ancient eyes holding a universe of understanding. She leaned in close, and her voice was a papery whisper. "Your grandfather would have been proud," she said. "He always said a garden needs a little wildness to be beautiful." Then she squeezed my hand, a brief, firm pressure, and walked away. That was it. But it was everything. It wasn't just validation, it was a connection, a recognition from another quiet rebel, another woman who knew the cost of staying silent and the cost of speaking up. In her words, I heard an echo of my own spirit. She didn't tell me to keep fighting. She just reminded me that my wildness, my voice, was not a flaw, but a source of beauty. The spark she lit was tiny, but it was enough to stop the surrender.
I didn't go to my father the next day. Instead, I went to the library and checked out a book on horticulture. The climb back wasn't a triumphant march. It was a series of small, intentional steps. I kept speaking, but I learned to temper my firmness with grace. I chose my moments. I learned to listen as much as I talked. I enrolled in a local community college for a landscape design course, not telling anyone at first. It was my secret, my sanctuary. In that class, my opinions were not just heard, they were requested. It was revolutionary. I started volunteering at the community garden I had mentioned, pouring my energy into the soil. Slowly, something began to shift. A few of my younger cousins started coming to me, asking for advice in quiet whispers. A different aunt asked for my help designing her backyard. My father saw my passion for the garden and, for the first time, asked me about my designs. It wasn't an apology, but it was a bridge. I was building a new life, not separate from my old one, but alongside it, on my own terms.
Today, the headaches are gone. my voice is no longer a trembling whisper or a desperate scream. It's just mine. Calm, steady, and resolute. I didn't shatter my family, nor did I abandon my heritage. I simply carved out a space within it where Amara, the whole of her, could exist. My victory wasn't in changing everyone else. It was in refusing to let them change the fundamental truth of who I was. I found that my strength wasn't in opposition, but in integration. I am the woman who loves the scent of cardamom, and the woman who can draft a blueprint for a public park. I am the daughter who respects her elders, and the woman who respects her own soul. The silence is no longer a prison. It is a choice, a peaceful moment I can now enter and leave as I please.
If I could speak to that quiet girl, the one with the constant headaches and the hidden sketchbooks, I would wrap my arms around her. I would tell her, I know you're scared. I know you think peace is worth any price. But then I would hold her face in my hands and say, your voice is not a weapon. It is your truth. Speak it, even if it trembles, for silence will only suffocate your spirit. You are not a problem. You are a possibility.
Thank you, Amara, for sharing your incredible story of courage with us. To everyone watching, if Amara's journey resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters too. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Unbroken Women for more testimonies of strength and resilience. We have a whole library of stories just like this one waiting for you. Until next time, be well.